Welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Jose.
I'm Mike.
And we're going to talk about A Wrinkle in Time, a new big-budget film based on a children's story.
A beloved children's story, if the Americans are to be believed, from 1962, although it's not one that I think is particularly well known over here.
No, I'd certainly never heard of it.
From here on, there's going to be spoilers. But if you're over 6 years old, it doesn't matter. So.
The other distinguishing factor is that it's directed by Ava DuVernay, and that I think it's the first African American to have directed, $100 million budget film or something like that. So,
well, surely Ryan Coogler with Black Panther.
Sorry, woman maybe.
Oh, okay. Well,
or African American woman, whatever. In many ways, I don't care because I hated it. So, what did you think?
Yeah, it says that she became the first woman of colour to direct a live-action film over $100 million budget.
Okay, there you go.
I didn't hate it, but I think it's not for me. I could feel you kind of scoffing at 1 or 2 points. I think the film is not aimed at us, though.
I think it's not aimed at us, and I accept it. But
this was a screen full of children.
Yes. So how it works on, and in many ways, it's the kind of film you wish for children, because the thing is that many of the sentiments I agreed with. It's a film that teaches children the value of knowledge and of science, and the value of reading, and so on. So it's also, I mean, there were things that are still surprising in American cinema, and that you're shocked that they're still surprising in American cinema. So, for example, it's very clear that what we're seeing is a mixed race family. Now, why a mixed race family should still continue to surprise, is surprising. But I registered that. I also noticed, for example, that kind of the youngest child was sat by a photo of James Baldwin sitting in the same position, and I kind of was quick to register that, the great James Baldwin has rarely been used iconographically like that in American cinema. The heroine is a girl, and it's a young black girl, which is also unusual in American cinema.
Well, mixed race. Her dad's white, her mum's black.
Okay, sorry, mixed race. So all of that is unusual, praiseworthy, whatever. But I just hated the tone of it.
I think the most interesting thing about the film is its representation, because I think there have been films like this before, and they have been equally mediocre and equally kind of full of plot inconsistencies and stuff that really doesn't matter to kids. But the central interesting thing about this is that it's representing people who really just don't get the chance to be represented in this way. It's representing, as you say, a mixed race family, and it is notable for that reason. I think there are lots of people out there who are now kind of grown black men and women who would have killed for the opportunity to have a film like this when they were kids.
Possibly.
That in itself makes it valuable.
Well, yeah, those things are important to me. However, the smugness of this film, I wanted to shoot everybody. I hate that. I hate that point of view. And actually, I think it's kind of, when Oprah Winfrey appears as in an overdressed drag queen from heaven or whatever, and begins to lecture everybody about how things should be and love and whatever. I hated it, right? And actually,
it is just for kids, though. That is just, it's pure. From an adult perspective, a lot of it is very trite and very simplistic and pretty dumb as well, yes. From a kind of logical consistency point of view. But from a kid's point of view, I think it's bright and colourful and magical and says all the right things, and is probably pretty good for kids.
Well, I don't know that, right? I mean, I can only respond as myself.
Yeah, sure.
Right, so, and I hated it. And I hated it, because it kind of also falls into what I see as a social thing. So, for example, I'm into political correctness in a way. I want people to be careful about the language that they use. And I want people to understand that, if somebody uses a word that they tell you hurts them, change the words you use. What's the big deal, right? Like kind of, words have meaning and power, and kind of words act on people, or the effect of words act on people. So, I'm all for political correctness. But actually, I think what other people criticize political correctness for, is something that I think this film is greatly guilty of. This incredibly arrogant smugness, of how things should be. This idea that kind of all of these people who made the film and all the people who contributed to the film, and Oprah primarily, kind of that they know all the answers and they're letting you in on the secret. Not only letting you in on the secret, but actually almost kind of quasi-ordering you to behave in those ways. That's the only proper way of behaving. I hate that and I resent that, and I think it's bad policy and bad politics.
I didn't see it quite that way. I thought it's quite explicitly teaching kids certain kind of moral lessons about how they should behave towards one another, and how, the importance of love. I mean, the kind of central conflict in the film is light versus darkness and love versus evil. And this planet in the middle of the universe that exudes evil and gives evil to the rest of the universe, and it's this kind of horrible, rotting sort of looking thing. Couldn't be more simplistic, and it's so that's kind of the tenor of the film. Like, it is that simple, and it's.
Well, what were your feelings when Oprah appeared and?
I thought it was hilarious because she's about 200 foot tall as well, so
yeah, and she's
that's quite funny.
Cloud,
and I did think the words drag queen myself, I've got to say.
Well, she appears with different beaded eyebrows, in every scene.
Hand, but then I think it's part of the film is all inclusive. If you want to dress as a drag queen and be 25 foot tall, then you absolutely should.
But you'll never find the drag queen so smug and knowing and it's and so saintly. It's no. This is the way the world should be. Love.
I did kind of like the Mindy Kaling character. There are these three...
I hated her as well.
Well, just let me fucking finish. So there were these three sort of... What are they called? Mrs. characters. There's Mrs. Whatsit.
There's what, which, and who.
Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Which, and Mrs. Who.
Yeah.
And Mindy Kaling, I think, is Mrs. Who. And she speaks... She's the only one who doesn't look like a drag queen, because she's dressed in kind of a sort of sari get-up most of the time.
They have the ugliest clothes I've ever seen in a movie.
But again, kids are not couturiers. So. But the Mindy Kaling character speaks almost exclusively in quotes from other people, and it's explained in the film as she thinks at such a high level. She thinks so much that she gets other writers and other thinkers to do her thinking for her when she does it out loud. Which is kind of silly, but what it basically means is that there's this kind of litany of quotes that comes out of her mouth, which it reminded me of the Pagemaster, which I don't know if you've ever seen.
No.
Pagemaster is a film from about 1995. It's largely animated. It's Macaulay Culkin in a library. And actually, it's a little bit like Ready Player One as well. He gets stuck inside novels. And so he has to escape from sort of Moby Dick and Long John Silver and things. And so cinematically, the film takes kids on a sort of tour of some great literature. And Mindy Kaling's character had an echo of that, where it was, so she speaks in quotes from Churchill and the Persian poet Rumi and Shakespeare, and also Lin-Manuel Miranda right at the end.
And the film is all new agey crap like that.
I was going to come on to that as well.
Every wound is a light.
I was going to come on to that as well. But the point is just to say that I think actually that aspect of her character, although it meant that in some ways she was restricted because she wasn't saying as much as the other characters, it is quite good because it's like sneaking kind of culture of a different sort into the film, which I liked. The thing about the New Age stuff is, so the central premise of the film is the girls, both her parents, in fact, not just her dad, are scientists. It's very vague about it. It's a kind of sci-fi fantasy, but it's incredibly vague about the sci-fi bit. So they're kind of quantum-y scientists, like who knows. And the dad has clearly found a way to get in between dimensions and travel across the universe very, very quickly through kind of wormholes. But the idea is he's actually been lost because this has happened, and they're searching for him. And really, I don't really mind it because it doesn't delve into it too much, and it's not kind of misleading enough to be annoying or to be irresponsible, I think. But combined with Oprah Winfrey, it kind of is, because on her TV show for 20 years or more, she was constantly putting on people who dealt in New Age, quantum woo, pseudoscience, and kind of magical thinking, and psychics as well. All this kind of bullshit she would put on her show and pipe into people's houses for 2 decades, which is incredibly irresponsible. And so, it's something that I think is, and then people go, oh, we want her to be the next president.
Okay,
I don't think so.
Let me take what you just said as a premise, though I don't quite see it that way because, I love Oprah, and I think she created a lot of positive social change.
I'm not saying she hasn't done that too.
Okay, I accept that. But where I was going with this was, that her show sprung from an inquiring mind. So, part of having all those quacks and New Ages and whatever, was exploratory, and also this is what people believe with, and she tried to find answers to questions that either she had or that people around her had, or that were social questions in the U.S. I'm perfectly fine with that. What I hate about her appearance in this film, anyway, though actually I've also seen her do this in other talk shows at the moment, is that she is now speaking as someone who has the answers. And that I resent, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it's just not true, really. And also, it's pop, right? Like, kind of, so I just I hate the all-knowing tone, right? Because I think one of the purposes of art is not only to enchant and so on, but it's also to make you think. Right, but the process is on you thinking, not on you accepting this New Age babble shit as, something that is the truth and needs to be taught and needs to be imbibed. And I think the film has that tone. I just hated it.
I do accept that. I do, and I see what you mean. But I think that there is a mitigating factor, which is the intended age of much of the audience. I think this film really is aimed at almost preschoolers. Like, it's really aimed at kind of maybe kids up to 7 or 8 or 9 years old, to the point where the lessons that they learn are more about being taught as opposed to encouraged to reason. In terms of kind of moral lessons.
Yes, well, I think
So the idea of it's like a fairy godmother almost is what she's being. And I'm not saying she's as good as the original fairy godmother, but I think that's the kind of area that it's aiming at.
If you think of a film like A Wizard of Oz, The Wizard of Oz, which actually it parallels in particular ways, right? I mean, that's a complex film, it asks complex questions like, what is it to have a heart? How do you live without a brain? Like, they're almost like fundamental existential questions, really, that kind of... you have children asking that, and it is quite incredible. What is courage, right? Like, it kind of, and there it's like the wizard is a con, and it's so much more complex. So to excuse it on the basis that it's a film aimed at children, to teach such pap to children. No,
that's true, and that's actually a really good point. Because when you think about The Wizard of Oz and how good that film was, a lot of it was in the idea that it was in her the entire time, and actually the idea that it's a dream in the end really means it was inside her the whole time. She was teaching herself this lesson, and in this it is much more simplistic, and it's much more a case of this wasn't in you the whole time. Or there's a kind of thing with the girl where she has to learn to find courage in herself, but it is more a case of being given answers, than learning them.
Yes, and the child actor who played the brother was irritating beyond belief, right? Like, kind of. So I hated that. I hated all three: Reese Witherspoon, Oprah Winfrey, and
Mindy Kaling.
Mindy Kaling. I hated all of them. They were horribly dressed. I mean, the ugliest clothes and most inexpressive clothes. Now, I think, there were, like, interesting little set pieces. So, for example, the bit where all the mothers are asking, it smells of roast chicken, and the mothers are asking their children to come in home, right? And I suppose it's giving them the message that you shouldn't go with strangers and so on.
Well, that was almost about conformity to me, like, because everyone was acting in unison there, bouncing the balls together and creating this horrible rhythm. And,
yes, exactly.
And had this it was this 1950s, 1960s picket fence Americana, which was incredibly scary. And actually, that I think has a racial component. Thinking about it, because that's really about
They were all white.
and it's a very white America.
Yeah. So
and very threatening.
That bit I liked.
Yeah.
I liked that flower or whatever that, where the children fly, towards some other dimension.
Oh, Reese Witherspoon turns into a big flying plant.
That's right.
Yeah.
I liked the design of that. The other bits, particularly in the dark world or whatever, I thought they looked really cheap. The bit where they are walking on physics formulations or whatever, that I liked.
Yeah,
that was
cool.
Simple and spare and elegant. So I think,
I think I kind of
there were things that were imaginative.
I think I did like the central premise in the design of the kind of evil home world, because thinking about the idea of conformity, I think that when they end up in that white room, that they end up climbing out through the sketches that they use. That room is almost completely white, but it has a kind of geometric. There's just dots all over it in a grid, and that there's an emphasis there. It's a design unlike anything you've seen in the rest of the film.
Yes.
There's an emphasis. It's kind of classic sort of. It's like the Death Star or something, or kind of angular as opposed to organic and rich like all the natural world, and it's expressing sort of a totalitarian, kind of conformist evil regime. Which again I think is maybe not saying very much, but it's expressive quite efficiently of the world it's portraying.
The film has a few elements of design like that are quite striking, but overall I found it hateful, really.
Yeah, it's not good enough really, but I think it's about time that black and non-white kids had a mediocre kids film to enjoy.
Well, they sure got one.
There's something interesting going on with the dad, because the search is for the dad. So you got the daughter and the younger brother looking for the dad, and also her mate comes along who's obviously interested in it. Although I kind of think he's probably going to turn out to be gay.
I thought so too. I mean, at the end when he said, "I've got things to discuss with my father," I thought, "What are they?"
Yeah, I think he had like a flashback, like a briefest shot in a flashback. I couldn't remember what. There was just obviously something going on in his life that he needs to talk to his mum and dad about. But it's it's definitely going to say that he's gay, isn't he? So they're going off to search for the dad, and then the witches or the mistresses have to leave them when they get to the evil place.
There's too much hate.
There's too much hate then.
Survive. Right,
too much darkness. Too much darkness. So they're off on their own, which is a perfectly legitimate way of kind of getting it into the kind of core of the kids have got to fight this for themselves. And they find the dad, and the dad's very sorry, and he didn't leave them. It was a mistake that he was trapped there for so long. But then the young son has been kind of taken over and reprogrammed by the evil people. And the dad's response is to go, "Let's leave him. I can't lose a kid again. We've got to come back. He's gone. We can't." And it's the daughter who says, "No, I'm staying for him." Which I think is wonderful, but it also means that when they eventually get home and she saved her brother, Dad has got some explaining to do.
And that's how the film ends.
But he doesn't do it. He says, "I'm sorry," but what he means is, "I'm sorry that I was away," not "I'm sorry I almost sacrificed your brother."
And not only your brother, your adopted brother, which makes it all the more of a loose end. So that's another of the film's many, 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 many problems.
But it's also another of its inclusivities, because it talks of an
adopted children being unloved.
Possibly.
But that's the message, that he's willing to sacrifice himself for his biological daughter, but not for his adopted son. That might be true,
but it's also the biological sister who decides, "No, I love him more than I love going home."
Well, that is also true. But nonetheless, that is there. And as you say, it isn't explained away by the film.
No.
So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the costume design, because I think it's atrocious. Those shapes. So there's two things that are going on that I want to comment on. First, all of those dresses are made in what is to me a really interesting and remarkable, in the sense of it being worthy of note, use of color. So it's using a range and a palette and a set of contrasting colors, that you rarely see, and that I very much associate with Latin America and the Caribbean. They're brighter colors, and there's more color and so on.
Primary colors as well.
So I thought all of that was wonderful to see. But the shapes in which, these women are dressed are just atrocious, right? And also, I thought it was almost like kind of irresponsible. So you can see that, like, Oprah Winfrey must have insisted, on how she is to be presented, because at least, I think she looks like a drag queen, but at least she's immaculate, right? Whereas every time you see Reese Witherspoon, you think, what have they done to you? Right? Like, that hair, that stringy... she's meant to be a fairy, for Christ's sakes, right? Like, an otherworldly kind of, dyadic being, and she's kind of presented like a 50-year-old hippie who stayed too long smoking reefers at the beach. It's just,
yeah, she has a sort of incomplete look to her somehow. Like it's like she hasn't had enough money spent on her.
Yes. Yeah, I think she might have been one of the producers. It might be as simple as that.
I didn't enjoy a lot of the cinematography. It's probably partially a function of the fact that we were sat so close to the screen, but also there's actually a very heavy reliance, particularly in the first half of the film, I'd say, on very, very large close-ups that have been taken with a reasonably long lens, and it seems to be, as I recall it, handheld quite a lot. So you don't get a good sense of scene geography sometimes, or like you have just enough to establish it, but then the film's really interested in getting you close in on faces, but it actually feels very tight and claustrophobic and not that pleasant to watch. It's just visually unpleasant, really.
Yes.
Not a nice place to be, and kind of uncomfortable. And I wouldn't say it got so far that I was kind of feeling like seasick or whatever, but it was not pleasant, and I think the film could have been... It didn't require it, It's almost got like this handheld, like Born Identity look that is totally unwarranted, and could be a lot calmer. And it doesn't seem to have any purpose. I found that really disappointing, really kind of, because Ava DuVernay is such a good director. Selma was a pretty decent film. Obviously, 13th was a documentary, but 13th is just unbelievably good. This film seemed really subpar for her.
Well, I think it's terrible. To me, it's not even like subpar. Doesn't do what I feel about it justice, which is that it's a terrible film, and I just hated that know-it-all smugness with which it kind of it doesn't even dramatize. It's like a lesson, that you're subjected to by these ignorant people who think they know it all.
I would say the moral of the story to me is if you've got kids and you're thinking of taking them to see this, very guardedly, because on the basis of its kind of representations, like there might be some value in it. But what I would really say is show them the Pagemaster from 1995, which is a brilliant little film, and everyone should see it.
If they haven't already seen The Wizard of Oz.
If they haven't seen, Wizard of Oz, then the Pagemaster, then this.
Okay.
We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, all the stuff. Oh, you've heard it.
Yes, but let's say it again properly.
Okay.
So we are eavesdropping at the movies. You can catch us on iTunes, on SoundCloud, on Facebook, and on Twitter.
Yeah, on Twitter we're at Eavesdrop Movies, and everything else is just eavesdropping at the movies.
Right. So thanks for listening.
There you go.